Life of Pi, The Hero's Journey. Even when you have your journey mapped out, things happen that shape your destiny in ways you might have never imagined. In the novel Life of Pi, written by Yann Martel, this journey is full of surprises while still following the quest pattern. So I made a diagram of the hero's journey quest pattern. And the first stage is the ordinary world, followed by the call to adventure, refusal of call, meeting the mentor, crossing the threshold, tests, allies, enemies, approach, ordeal, reward, the road back, resurrection, and return with the elixir. I focused on 3 stages of this quest pattern, and they were the ordinary world, the approach, and the resurrection. The ordinary world is when the hero, uneasy, uncomfortable, or unaware, is introduced sympathetically so the audience can identify with the situation or dilemma. The approach is when the hero and newfound allies prepare for the major challenges in the special world. And the resurrection is at the climax of the novel. The hero is severely tested once more on the threshold of home. The heroic pattern is used in many of today's successful novels. This is a pattern of heroic, emotional ups and downs that keep the reader hooked throughout the story. Life of Pi by Yann Martel is a perfect example of a successful, heroic quest pattern, showing great detail to the call to adventure, the approach, and the resurrection. The points that I'm going to be focusing on are how this novel successfully shows the stage of call to adventure in the heroic quest pattern. My second point is when Pi realizes that he has to become acquaintances with Richard Parker in order to survive. This is when he reaches the approach stage. And finally, when Pi gets questioned about his story, he reaches the resurrection stage of the heroic quest pattern. During the stage of call to adventure, the reader learns about how Pi's family is moving to Canada. Pi learns that he is moving to Canada from India with his family because they would have a greater chance of a future ahead of them. The evidence that I found in the novel is on page 77 when Pi says that people move in hope of a better future. This quote foreshadows what happens in the future of the book and informs the reader of the adventure and transformation that is about to take place. This evidence represents the calling to adventure to Canada. Pi talks about how Asia is going through political problems that cause the family to decide to leave. My evidence from the book is when Pi says that the mid-1970s were a troubled time for India on page 275. It was announced to us one evening during dinner. Ravi and I were thunderstruck. Canada. This evidence relates to the call to adventure because it gives the family a reason to move. The political problems instituted the idea of moving and was initially the main reason for moving to Canada. When India started to go under political problems and the family decided to move to Canada, the call to adventure stage in the heroic quest pattern was born. The approach stage in this novel is also very important, which is when Pi and Richard Parker become friends. Once Pi realizes that Richard Parker is not going to attack him, he begins to conquer his fear and he trains him. The evidence that I found in this book was on page 236. Pi says, "I had to tame him. It was at that moment that I realized this necessity. It was not a question of him or me, but him and me. This evidence represents the realization that Pi needs to work as one with the tiger. The hero, or Pi, has made allies to prepare for the major challenges ahead. Pi begins to get Richard Parker food to keep himself alive and safe. The evidence that I found in this novel was when Pi said, "I can eat the biscuits, but God made tigers carnivorous, so I must learn to catch fish. If I don't, I'm afraid his last meal would be a skinny vegetarian boy." Pi realizes that in order to survive, he has to feed Pi. The evidence above shows that Pi starts to get the food for the tiger to keep them both alive and safe. Pi realizes that he needs allies to survive and prepare for the major challenges ahead. In order to do so, he uses the approach stage by learning to work with Richard Parker. Finally, the resurrection stage is very apparent in the life of Pi. Pi is tested again when he is questioned about his story. The investigator doesn't believe Pi because he said an orangutan floated to him on a bunch of bananas. The evidence that I found from the book was on page 317, when the investigator said with a look of disbelief, "Bananas don't float. You said the orangutan floated to you in a bundle of bananas, but bananas don't float." When this occurs, Pi, the hero of the book, is getting tested once more. This is what is called the resurrection stage. Pi proves that bananas do float and starts to get annoyed by all of the questioning and tests. The evidence that I found from the book was when Pi said, "Tigers exist, lifeboats exist, oceans exist. Because the three have never come together in your narrow, limited experience, you refuse that they might." Pi is feeling frustrated towards the disbelief of his story. He has tried to explain himself, but is not able to get the point across. Pi is getting questioned and tested for the last time in this novel. This is what we call the resurrection stage in the heroic quest pattern. The call to adventure, approach, and resurrection stages of the heroic quest pattern are distinctively practiced in The Life of Pi by Yann Martel. In the beginning of this novel portrays the call to adventure stage and the heroic quest pattern perfectly. Later in the book, Pi becomes less afraid of the tiger and starts working with him. This is when the approach stage takes place. Finally, after the adventure is over, Pi gets put to another test while getting questioned about his experience. This is the last stage of the heroic quest pattern, the resurrection. There are many novels that follow the heroic quest pattern, such as Life of Pi, and I look forward to learning about more of them. Keep going. And this is my works cited.